So let's get all the business stuff out of the way.
Let's
All
do
right,
it.
you've got Asaph is an artist. He's an incredible artist. If you have not seen his work, then you need to pay attention more because you've been everywhere lately. It's been incredible. You did a project with us at Blues Fest last year. Did an
Yes.
amazing portrait of Buddy Guy. You work out of the Accelerator, the Windsor
Yes.
Accelerator, right?
Yes.
And then you just opened a new gallery up too, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So, thank you for giving me my minute in the spotlight here. That's great. Yeah, I think I have to stay busy, right? I mean, a lot of us. I think a lot of probably if you're watching, I can almost guarantee you're one of those people too, because otherwise you'd be sleeping in on a Sunday.
Right.
But yeah, I have to stay busy. So I have my studio where I work from, and then we just opened a gallery that's inside of Coulter's. So they gave us a whole area, like a chunk of the building, like really a couple rooms, which we just filled up with art and made it look nice, right? So
I believe the Buddy Guy picture is in that too,
the
right?
Buddy Guy painting is there. Yes, yeah,
Picture, sorry,
yeah.
photographer.
That's okay. That's okay.
So, we were actually talking about some philosophy. Now that all the
Yes.
business stuff is out, we were talking about some philosophy stuff, and I had said to you, I'll go right back into it. I had sort of explained to Asaph that I have a way of when I'm sitting out on the porch here, kind of thinking. I try to put my mind in the headspace of my dog to try to figure things out without language and just kind of, without all of the things of being a human trying to get in the way. And you said that there was a book that you had read that kind of talk to me about that book a little bit. Give me a little bit of background on that.
Well, I've actually read two,
Okay.
right? So the first one is called What the Dog Saw, and that I think it's by Mark Haddon. The name just popped back into my head. Um, but even without our discussion about getting into the mind of a dog, this book was incredible. Like I would highly recommend it. And if anyone who knows me knows I read
Mm-hmm.
books like an absolute maniac. Um, Partly because of my upbringing, my cult upbringing. I was not allowed to read books, so once I escaped that, I became
I
a
can't. We're gonna
savage.
get into all of that stuff too, but I want to hear about this
But
specifically.
yeah, but this book is, I believe the entire book is written from the dog's perspective, but it's so cleverly done, right?
Right.
Like you can imagine this going south
Right.
really quickly.
Right. Right.
It being so ridiculous. Like, wait, how do you think your dog thinks that though? Like,
Right.
but this is so clever and so nuanced. You would love it. I think anyone would love this
It's
book.
it's funny because it's that the idea of a thought experiment like that is it's it's an interesting idea to me because I think we have a hard time sort of like pulling ourselves out of our own environment a lot of the time. And the reason I'm talking about all of that is specifically to talk about the environment that you pulled yourself out of. So, you and I have touched on this briefly. I know you've been on other podcasts and you've kind of gone over some stuff. I have specifically avoided all of that because I wanted to have this very specific conversation with you. So let's start at the very beginning. You were born into a sex cult.
Yes.
Okay. Talk to me about just give me the basics about tell me about the cult itself so that we have a little bit of basis and background and that kind of thing and then we'll move from there.
Sure thing. Yeah. Okay. So the cult was called the Children of God, and then later switched names a couple times, became the Family of Love. Then it became the Family International. Whatever. Uh,
Okay.
Stages of various titles and names. So I was born into it. So in 81. So 39 years ago, and I spent 28 years in the cult because I was raised in communes throughout basically Mexico, the United States, Canada, and then when I was 17, I went to India where I spent a decade, got married, had 5 kids. So I had a lengthy, even by cult standards, like a medium to long length of time in the cult.
Your entire background.
Yeah,
Everything.
yeah, absolutely, yes. And so that time was pretty much spent isolated from the world, not physically. So by the world, I just mean not the cult.
Right.
And which we were taught was an evil and terrible place run by the devil and by the demons and horrible people who's
So the basis of like your very basic background is everybody in this group, Everybody with this label
Yeah.
is good.
Correct.
Everybody outside of this group is bad.
That's
Period.
right. Unless we were able to convert them to our way of thinking, and then they became one of the good guys.
But do they also become useful tools?
Well, it's more about, I think when talking about cults, right? Because after leaving, escaping is really probably a more accurate word. After escaping the cult and going through probably several years of, I guess, just understanding that I was in a cult. Like, I didn't even call it a cult for probably 4 or 5 years after leaving, right? That slowly dawned on me. But even just understanding, like, what is a cult, right? I think is a great conversation to have, because I think a lot of people, in my experience, will call something a cult if they just don't like it.
Right.
You know what I mean? They'll call certain religions cults if they don't like them, but their religion's fine. Their religion's not a cult. Or if a religion has been around long enough, it kind of slowly becomes not a cult anymore.
Yeah.
Whereas to me, all religions are culty.
100%.
But definitely some of the newer religions are far more culty. It's a lot more concentrated cultiness.
Right.
So it is a scale. It's almost like, I often compare it to alcoholism, right? It's like, how do you know? It's tricky to know. But answer these 20 questions.
Right.
And if you answer yes to 18, you might have a problem.
Right.
and same for a cult, right? There's 20 questions,
Right.
and if said cult answers yes to 18 out of 20, it's pretty culty.
So talk to me about the one that you came up with.
Yeah. So
What are the 20 questions that it got wrong?
The 20 questions. One is, I think, is there, like, to me, one of the most important ones, although certainly not the all in all, is is there one person who tells everyone what to do and is pretty much revered as godlike, or the prophet, and if that's the case for, like, a religion, then I would say it's pretty much your cult, right?
Right.
Like, that's one of the deciding factors. But if you think about it, every corporation operates that way,
Right.
And certainly families, there's often
Governments.
governments. So but are those things culty? Of course they are, and that's why I'm working on a book. Actually, I'm writing my memoir, and that might take me. I don't know how long it'll take me. I don't know.
How old are you?
I'm 39 now.
You still need another 6 years.
Yeah, possibly.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm kind of in that frame of thinking.
It's funny because I'm sort of I don't mean to chat,
Yeah.
but I'm sort of in the same spot, and I'm just really, like, I've always wanted to, like, I've always had this idea that I wanted to write, and I was like, why don't you ever just sit down? It's only occurring to me yet now that it's like, oh, I'm not there yet. There's still some stuff that I have to figure out before I can even start to tackle that. But
Agreed.
anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Agreed. No, I like this thread. Let's pull on this one, right?
Yeah.
I absolutely have to write what to me is the best book I can write.
Right.
Same thing. So I believe that I need to first read a gajillion books, which I've been doing.
Right.
But then very recently, I found out that there's a bunch of books written by former cult members. And I think that there's going to be a moment where the interest and awareness globally for cults and former cult members and what is a cult and what was it like is going to just explode. And so I want to kind of catch that wave, if it indeed exists or is coming, which I don't know, of course.
There was when I was a kid, we didn't do many family vacations and stuff. But one that we did is we went to Midland, Michigan. And I remember, and I mean, I was like young, and we went up to this, the cottage or whatever that we had rented on this lake wasn't ready yet, and we went up to this hill, and we were overlooking this compound that had, like, llamas and stuff or whatever. And I remember my parents saying something about, oh, it's a cult. Like, they had said what it was, but I didn't catch what it was or whatever. And they said it was a cult, and I later learned it because I asked my mom about it. It was one of the Moonies cults, and I kind of looked into that. Did you guys have, like, a compound? Was it sort of set up like that, or was it kind of more like communal sort of thing? Like, are we talking David Koresh compound deal?
Not quite to that. Well, so the way that my, and I still say my cult, former.
Yeah.
Quickly want to say that former cult, but
yeah, your cult's a whole brand new thing.
Yeah. Well, my cult, the one I'm working on now. Join that one. We're the real good guys.
Right.
But no, I still say we, and obviously because that's still the biggest chunk of my life, right?
Yeah.
but definitely ideologically, it's absolutely in the past. But so our cult had communes,
Okay.
but most of these properties were rented, but some, of course, were owned by the cult.
Mm-hmm.
Also big compounds, David Koresh style big compounds. But like our cult was like, there was probably, I don't know, there was many thousands of members at any given
Oh wow.
time,
Okay.
and it kind of grew to probably at least 10,000 full-time members at its peak, or even more. I don't know.
In a single area or worldwide?
All over the world.
Okay.
But like, so each unit or compound or commune was three or four or five, whatever it was, families and some single people living all together in one house.
Okay.
Right. So that's how I grew up. Right. But various, I would say, maybe 15 or 20 such communes throughout my life that I grew up in.
Just what is that experience like? Like growing up in a house full of a bunch of people who, and I mean, I suppose in one sense, like it felt like they were all family anyway.
Yes.
But there has to be like ideas of privacy and separation and all that kind of thing. Are they like, do they maintain through all of that, or does it become a different thing?
Uh, way, 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 way more watered down
Okay.
versions. I don't know that. I'm trying to think. Now you're asking questions that probably I haven't really phrased in my head in the same way. But
Sure.
in terms of privacy, yeah, I think it was very minimal, right? I think
Yeah.
it was very, very minimal. I think there was also this concept, which I think is one of the many commonality threads between our cult and other Christian groups, organizations, new religious movements, cults, whatever you want to call them, which was that you should have nothing to hide, right? If you're being honest and being, I don't know, just like following God closely, then what privacy? Like, what do you need that for? Kind of thing. I think
Right.
was a general. I don't think it was stated that way, but like, so many things are not really written down. It's more of a.
It's just the general overall. Do you have a do you have a constant sort of feeling that you are always being observed? I guess that's kind of where I'm getting at the privacy thing.
Well, I mean, how do I answer that? You're living with like 20, 30, 40 people. Yes, absolutely. You're
Right.
always being observed. And much more than that, I think, was this sense that God is always watching,
Right.
right? Like passing out judgment. This was good what you did, and that was bad thing that you did. And but here's what's strange, and I think this comes back to like the working title I have for my book, which is "We're All Culties." That's the title I'm going with as of now. But even if I don't choose that title, that's the general theme, right?
Right.
Like, I can say, well, I was raised in a cult to believe that there was an all-powerful God going to punish me for all my misdeeds, but guess what? You don't have to be raised in a cult for that to
Right,
happen.
right. Yeah, yeah.
That's like Christianity in general. Certainly, other religions which shall remain unnamed and multiple belief systems,
Yeah.
you don't have that in place, right? Like,
Yeah.
even karma. Like, let's go with
All
that,
of it,
right? Like,
yeah.
you do bad things, and
The
you're
justice
gonna
system
the
is the
justice
exact
system.
it's
Yeah.
the exact same thing. Yeah.
So that's why I come back to this concept of like, we're all culties. Ultimately, we've all had some sort of, brainwashing, programming, something we grew up with that was completely dysfunctional, false, damaging, pernicious, whatever, and we just accepted it hook, line, and sinker because, like, we were raised with that ideology from infancy.
Well, I mean, the biggest problem is you have nothing to compare it against.
Yes.
Right? Like, that's your experience. And even if you see other things happening, you don't have to judge other things as being bad to not sort of get how it works.
Yeah.
You just have nothing to sort of weigh it and balance it.
Yeah.
Do you have... Is there... And this is such a stupid question because I know who you are, and it for you it definitely has to be, but like, how do you gain a sense of individualism in an environment like that is kind of what I'm getting. Like, how do you find a sense of self outside of that?
Like, after leaving?
Even in it.
In it, I think it's very much, almost, I would say, non-existent, right? The idea of individuality or individualism is, I would say, it's pretty much non-existent in my cult, and I think across multiples. The idea was, be more like Jesus. That was like the bottom line, right? So what personality, right? Like, the goal was to be more like this ideal, like this. It was a bit hazy, but it was definitely.
I don't know, man. Like, if you believe that he existed, he was like flipping tables over and shit,
That's the thing.
right?
Exactly. I mean, yeah, not that bit so much, but
Right? They don't push that part.
no, no, no. Be
Yeah.
like the other types, the
Right,
other parts
right.
of the way Jesus was. Uh, it's again, it's a whole, I believe, Christian worldview, and we do have it. Like like all of us, people watching, you and me, we have lenses that we see the world through that we're unaware of. We were just talking about that. Like, what is consciousness?
Yeah.
That's the same as any other belief system. You don't know you don't have it,
Right.
or you don't know you have it. It's like it's summarized well in the joke about the fish. You know that one?
No, no, no.
So the fish are passing each other in the ocean one day, and the one fish says to the other, "Water's nice today," and the two fishes go by, and the one turns to the companion and says, "What the hell is water?"
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
so these are like our.
I've never
our
heard that
beliefs.
expressed as a joke, but I've definitely heard the fish can't see water kind of
Yeah,
idea. Yeah, it's one of those. It kind of ties back into like some of even the stuff that we were talking about before, like just trying to figure out who you are in the world and like what parts of you need to be fixed.
Yes.
Right? That's I mean, to me I think that's a lot of what I'm asking because
Yeah.
if you come up I suppose if you come up in an environment that is that heavily controlled, I mean, I guess in a way we all are because all
Yes.
of our environments are heavily controlled. How do you decide who you are in that? Like, how did you come through your experience from? Because it wasn't like you were like rebel teenager 14, like screw you mom, I'm right. It was you spent your whole life there and went like, okay, it's time to start moving through. What was it through that experience that started like I have triggers in my life that made changes. Do you have pieces of that through this experience?
You know, my transition from culty to non, first of all, started with a stroke of pretty much just pure coincidence, and that coincidence or that chance event was my now ex-wife and I flying from India where we were living. We were actually just at the cusp of opening our own commune, right?
Okay.
We'd been lifelong members. We were good culties. We did what we were told. We were like, we were the ideal citizens, and we were now ready to launch our own, our own branch of the cult. So we were there, like literally at that point. We already had other people who were like, "Yeah, we'll join you guys. You're the shit. We love what you're doing." And but before we did that, we decided to fly to Toronto, to Canada, where I'm originally born in Canada,
Right.
to do some paperwork for the kids, right? So Sharon, my ex-wife, and I have 5 kids, and they were all born in India, and part of our thing was like, let's get some paperwork, let's get them their citizenships, birth certificates, whatever it is, like just get that on lockdown in the case of whatever future eventuality. And there was some financial things that we were hoping to lock down too, to have an income over there. And so that was really the element that made the split start to happen, because it was being out of the daily brainwashing, out of the
Right.
daily environment of, of the cult, right? Like every day was very regimented. It was very militaristic, right? It was like you wake up, you read the Bible and the teachings of the prophet for a couple hours, and then your whole life, what time do you have to really reflect on what you're doing? Essentially none, right? And we weren't
Okay.
exposed to, we didn't have access to internet, music, television. Like those things were out there, but we were told like those are like the channels of, the evil spirits or whatever, the devil, and that's gonna pollute us and destroy us. So we didn't really use those.
Is it almost even because like right Midwestern punk rock kid I come from, turn down the music, mom and dad are trying to steal your records kind of shit. That's a whole different sort of way of thinking about parents controlling your music than what you're talking about. It just didn't exist for you guys, right?
Well, correct. Absolutely. No, not at all. So our cult was like I don't know how to compare it to others, because
Sure.
since leaving, I found that not only were we not specifically what the cult taught us we were, the God's only end time army and the world's about to end and we're going to save it, but that specific belief is actually extremely common
Right.
amongst actual cults, and then also amongst, like,
Major
go
religions.
figure, a corporation.
Yeah.
You know, like,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you have to believe the world's coming to an end to work at SpaceX. Like, because why would you do it otherwise?
Oh, I
You
don't know. No. I totally disagree with that.
No? Maybe.
Yeah. Just because, like, I think if you're heavily invested in science, which, I mean, we can discuss the cultiness of science versus the fact that, like, you can prove 90% of it. The rest of it is theoretical. But I think if you're heavily invested in science, you don't have to think the world's going to come to an end to go, like, oh, that's where I want to work.
Yeah.
Like, or working at the Large Hadron Collider. I have a friend who did an internship at the Large Hadron Collider. Like, when they turned that thing on, there were people that, and not people who were well respected for whatever, but there were people that are going like, hey, there's a chance you could be opening a black hole when you do that, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's one of those things that, if you're whether you think it's true or not, that's one of those ghosts that is dangling over you before you sort of make that first leap into the, all right, you've done all the theoretical stuff, now
Yeah.
let's see if it really works, right?
Well, they said that before the first atomic detonation too, right?
Yeah,
they were
they
like, maybe reality will cease to exist. We don't know, but anyway, bing.
Yeah, there's a chance this might light the atmosphere on fire. That was one of the major
Yeah.
concerns, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, I don't mean to trample.
That's okay.
It's,
We take wherever the road takes us.
so talk to me. So you guys land in Canada.
Yeah.
You're in Toronto, I believe.
Yeah.
And I think you took a job working in a restaurant, because we've
That's
had
right.
part of this conversation before. Talk to me about how does the process start of you kind of like questioning?
Well,
Yes.
I'll tell you, but this is in hindsight, and that
Yeah.
process pretty much started just by being exposed to different ideas.
Is it that simple?
I believe so, and the reason I believe that is because that continues to this day. So I've been out for 10 years, out of the cult, but I continue to take in new ideas, right, and at as rapid of a pace and as bizarre of ideas as possible, and by and large, mostly that comes through books, but podcasts, I mean, television shows, movies, just anything, right? I continue to do it. But in the beginning, I think I was taking them in accidentally. It's an opinion here, it's an opinion there. Somebody would say something, or maybe I would watch a forbidden movie, and I'd be like, wait.
Why did you? Okay, but then, what's the decision process to watch that forbidden movie?
I think it's, I think it's just.
Just because
the way
you're not
things go.
controlled?
Yeah, and it might not be an instant thing. It might not be like, yay, I'm on this trip, I get to do whatever I want. Because obviously there was that sense of, here's what you should do and here's what you shouldn't do. But maybe after, 3 months or 6 months, like, okay, so let's talk about the movies specifically. So the movies we were not allowed to watch were anything violent, right?
Okay.
Violence was supposed to, like, corrupt you. And this is, again, this is one way of seeing the world that's not specific to religions or cults, but it's certainly a lot more common, right? Like, a lot of religious ideologies believe that you should avoid, like, negative things, violent things, evil, right? Like, or it'll turn you into that. Right? Like, don't watch or don't listen to the punk rock because, you're going to become suicide or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that's a worldview. That's a worldview. It could be true for some people. I don't know. But at some point I realized, hey, this is actually completely objectively false for me, right? And and it may have happened maybe watching a violent scene in a movie where like I felt a process of my mind shifting, where it wasn't like, ooh, now I want to go and stab someone, but it was more like I empathized with the victim. I don't know specifically which.
Sure.
I'm just talking, this was like a process that happened generally.
Yeah.
And it actually, I felt it guiding me away from, like, that particular negative impulse, which I think all humans have all negative impulses and all positive ones, right? It's which both do you feed. But yeah, watching violent things, or listening to, you know, aggressive music or screamo didn't make me want to be more that way. In fact, it made me want to be less that way. And so that was like a fundamental, like, core belief that I was taught my whole life. And when I realized this is objectively just not true for me, it made me start to, it bled over and made me start to question other things.
Do you, and because we talked a little bit off camera about like anger, specifically my tendency towards it. Did you? We all have that piece of us that's like angry about something at some point. But do you? Because you seem to be very level-headed to me for a lot of times. But I also kind of know that you've spent a lot of time working your way to like that point of view. Do you have like that angry side? Do you have that sort of like? Do you have that piece of you that needed that outlet, that release? That is, do you think that part is what was seeking out like the screamo stuff, the violent like is? Do you think there's a connection there? Like is that there, or is it more exploratory for you?
More exploratory, I think.
Okay.
I've never really related very closely to anger as an emotion.
Okay.
There have been other ones, depression. I mean,
Sure.
I can list, give you my top five, that,
Right.
emotions or feelings that I'm very familiar with. But anger was just never one of them.
Okay.
Of course, I'll feel angry or rage at whatever certain points in
Right.
time, but it's just not super common
It's not an overall base
for me.
you.
Yeah, and I think it's just because, like, my logic, which has of course messed with me as many times as it's saved me, probably far more.
Right.
But my logic usually kicks in and starts to be like, well, like, what's going to be the outcome of this angry reaction or outburst, and I'm usually like, not necessarily the thing I want, unless it is. Right? Unless it's,
Yeah.
sometimes you get the reaction you want by having the angry outburst. But most of the time I'm like, what is the reaction that's going to get me the outcome I want? And often it's that,
Yeah.
be like water.
Yeah.
It's more like, so then it's like, well, what's the point, right? So I'm not such an angry guy.
No. It's interesting because you specifically were talking about the violent movies and the violent music, and for me, like, I know when I got involved in like punk rock music and like moshing. I grew up in the '90s, right? So it was the birth of moshing and slam dancing was earlier, but like that was, as a kid, for me, I was like, oh, this is like an opportunity, because I love UFC, but I'm not a violent person, but having a reasonable spot to unleash that always made sense to me. Like, for me, it makes complete sense. If you and I right now go, yeah, okay, let's throw fists, and we're both into it, I think it's ridiculous that anybody would get involved.
Yeah.
We've both agreed to it, cool. That's different than me deciding I'm going to throw fists at you and you going, no, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's like, for me, that anger part is like, it is a base. It's one of those emotions that's like, okay, I see where that's a motivating factor in a lot of stuff, but can be motivating. I think that's why guys join the military.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Anyway, philosophical.
Well, I mean, this is, again, like, just to stay on whatever thread we're on.
Yeah.
But the philosophy of the two motivating factors for any human being, the pursuit of pleasure or the avoidance of pain.
Yeah.
And that is something which I like to really think about and unpack in my head sometimes.
Yeah.
Which I don't think, of course, can ever fully be done. But yeah, I just think it ties into that. It's interesting.
Fear is such an interesting motivator. Everybody thinks about fear as a motivator, like, oh, I'm afraid of something, so I do something else. Or like when people throw it around in social media and stuff, like, oh, you just fear. That's why you're going to wear a mask. What? Fear motivates people in so many ways that you don't even sort of in specifically thinking about this stuff. I've come to realize there are things that I did in my life that were purely out of fear. That if you would have asked me at the time, I could have explained to you exactly why I was doing it, and it was all bullshit.
Yeah. Absolutely. Definitely. The power of belief, I think, is incredible. I've been thinking about that a lot more and reading about that, right? Like, there's that saying that whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. So,
Yeah.
like, using that as, like, a basis for the discussion, right? But going forward, we may have all kinds of reasons for why we do or don't do something. Being broke, as an example, right? Like, But really, why is someone broke? It could be just fear or a belief system, right? Like here's other things. I grew up with a belief that and every belief was backed with Bible verses. So like I can immediately
Right.
clink and lock back down into like the basis of that belief, and then the Bible was held up as this um, infallible, right? The Word
Right.
of God, and then the prophet, David Berg was like the interpreter of it. So you know what I mean. So there was no questioning any of it.
Right.
And on finances, one of those pillars was, that it's very difficult for a rich man to enter into heaven, right? And there was multiple examples cited, and so I grew up with that. Never questioned it. Never questioned to question it, and only after reading multiple to me, the genesis was reading multiple books that questioned that, but without me knowing that that's what they were questioning. So books like
Gotcha.
Rich Dad Poor Dad, or books like Think and Grow Rich, right? Like
Yeah.
dozens. I mean, The Richest Man in Babylon. I could go on and on. I've probably read 50 or 100 just on this one topic,
Right.
and then gradually realizing that if I believe that there's something evil or wrong or immoral, or I've cheated someone about wealth, right? Then that's going to be a barrier to me acquiring it,
Yeah.
obviously. So
Yeah.
so or I remember when when I'd see someone outstandingly wealthy, or I'd see the Lambo driving down the road, I'd have this little scratch in the back of my head that it's probably some crook, it's probably some drug dealer or unscrupulous businessman. I no longer think that, because why would I open with a negative opinion? What if it's a guy who invented a widget that helped 1 billion people? I don't know that.
And it's so funny because like that specific topic, I started through the podcast and through the stuff with Vanilla Ice going down to Florida or whatever, and even before that, having explored some of these worlds and had backgrounds with people or whatever. And I can put myself in just about any situation. Just hey, so long as the person I'm dealing with ahead of me is decent, I'm fine. But there's always been something about opulence that just sits so weird with me. And having been down there and having seen it, and I was really worried about going down there and sort of being part of it, specifically because of what you're talking about there. Sitting down with the guy and talking to him, seeing what he has and seeing the stuff that's around, and then knowing who he is and what he's doing with like his money and his fame and whatever. Not that it's any of my fucking business, which is the primary rule that I learned there. But like, it's like, man, what do you want? What else was he supposed to do? He did his thing. He hasn't hurt anybody. He got screwed over more than anybody in a lot of situations, and he's doing his thing. Maybe he's not saving the fucking planet, but neither am I. Like, it's a really, I think in a lot of the conversation that happens on social media right now, especially with money and power and whatever, there's a lot of people that just sort of look at it. It's like, well, as soon as you're doing that, you're automatically evil, and I can't buy into it. And I think that's 90% of the problem of the disagreements that are going on right now. It comes right back to the cultiness that you're talking about.
Yeah, and part of it too is just being overly invested in other people's opinions. So I'm going to go ahead and use some labels right now. A low level of thinking about wealth is that you have to be a crook to acquire more of it.
Right.
So let's say that I don't even really have that opinion, but I am really concerned about what the people around me think. So let's say that I now start to come into like a little bit of money, or I buy a nice vehicle that obviously cost a chunk of money, and post that on Facebook, and I get, let's say, a comment, oh, another crook, I guess you sold your soul to the devil. Things like a comment like that at a certain stage would have had a very powerful impact
Right.
on me.
Yeah.
And I believe that a comment like that would still have a very strong impact on a lot of people, right? Sold your soul to the devil. I mean, what does that mean anyway? Like, that's such a
Right.
generalized statement, but it carries weight because it used to mean certain actions was doing that, right?
I think people still say the exact same thing. They just don't use those words, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's you're
sold out.
Yeah, you sold out. You're the sold out thing. Coming from a world, and as artists, the sold out thing is such. I remember being a kid, wanting to be an artist of some sort, right? Not really realizing it, but like the idea of selling out, and specifically the idea of being a has-been, was sort of, and it sort of attaches a little bit, but it was, would you rather be a has-been or a never was?
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
So like the idea, because I don't know if people really talk about it much now, but when I was a kid, that a has been was an one hit wonder, but he's a did his thing and now he's gone and now he's not worth anything. That idea was always like, I don't I couldn't, the people that would talk about it like that, I couldn't understand it, and that seemed to have turned over to the, you know, this, the sellout, like, because you're doing what you love at a level where a lot of people enjoy it and you're doing well at it, that's a bad thing.
Mm.
What, coming from a punk rock world, like, to hear punk rock kids talking about selling out, it's like, what do you want? So you only want to talk to 5 people? That's
Yeah.
what you're looking to do with your message?
Yeah.
That never made sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Definitely, it's an interesting just concept, and I think I think today on my way here today, I was listening to a talk on or one of the Tom Bilyeu's things, right? His impact theory.
Okay.
He was talking about. I lost my train of thought.
It happens. We're randomly just going through anyway. It's actually, let me check the time as we're going through here. Yeah, we're doing well. So talk to me. We'll go back to the escaping the cult thing. So when you're in Toronto and you start getting exposed to these different ideas, at what point? At what point does it become clear to you that that isn't a thing that you want to do anymore? And what's the process of, like, making that decision?
Well, it certainly was not an overnight decision by any means.
Right.
We had round trip tickets booked with a 1 year open.
Okay.
So we were meant to spend 1 year in Toronto, and I would say it took pretty much the full year. You know, to deprogram 28 years, it took the full year, because I can't remember making that decision not to go back. I don't actually
Really?
remember making that decision. I think it was a gradual, like it was in multiple discussions like this over a year, and how much can a person change in a year? Dramatically. So my now ex-wife and I just, you know, little doubts, right? Like, oh, not sure about, what about this? Yeah, that's a little bit sketchy. It's you know, there's this sketchy element and that sketchy element, and I think at some point it all culminated in a, like, we're not going back, are we? And no, we're not going back. You know.
And this is both of you together.
Well, I think it would have been, yeah.
Yeah.
It would have been. Like I said, I don't recall that decision.
Gotcha.
But obviously, it was made because we had tickets booked.
Right.
But I do remember the moment where I was sitting with my ex-wife, and we were. It was the day we were meant to go back, but we had already pre-decided not to. We're sitting in our apartment in Toronto, and we're looking at planes, and we're like, one of those must have been the plane that was supposed to take us back. And I remember that moment being like significant, because I knew that I was never going back to the cult. I probably knew it before, but that was definitely
But that was the
marker.
signpost kind of thing.
Signpost where it's like, you have officially left
Yeah.
the point of no return. Like, that's like, you've left Earth's orbit. You're done.
Was there? Because I mean, not all signpost moments come with, like, a big weighty sort of emotional thing. But was there any of that there for you?
I don't know. Again, I don't really think so. I think 28 years of being programmed for one particular worldview and task as well. Like, the only task that I was raised for was to continue to do the things that I was born into, right? And that was, you know, to preach the gospel to every creature, right?
Was your art part of your life through any of that?
Yes and no. It was always there. It was in my DNA, because I enjoyed pulling out a pencil or crayon or marker and copying something, or but definitely art was dramatically, it was very heavily suppressed, in the sense of, I would say, expression, right? Like, I couldn't just, I could definitely not draw or illustrate anything that wasn't within the, you know, dogmatic worldview of what is okay,
Right.
within the cult, right? So, like, I could draw Jesus and the saints all day,
Right.
right, and in splendor and glory, and etc. That theme. But if I was to draw anything, dark or in any way that wasn't acceptable, then that wasn't allowed. So expression, certainly not.
Did you have any of those moments?
I don't know. I must have. I must have had thousands and just suppressed them to the
No, no,
point
no. But I
where.
mean, did you have a moment where you drew something that was dark or did it? And
Well,
somebody
yeah,
was
for
like,
sure.
"Hey,
In fact, and I talked about this somewhat in some other interview. I can't remember when, but I actually had to burn a whole mountain of my drawings.
okay." So talk to me about this.
Yeah, so this is again, and this is a nice little marker post too of looking back later and realizing like, oh, that was fucked up.
Right.
But what happened with that was I was probably a teenager and got into drawing nudes, and I was
Yeah.
like into it because I guess it was because I was a teenager, but also too creatively it was just a phase, right? The nude body is beautiful, can be, right?
Well, it also, I mean, when you're coming up as an artist, it's also hitting you as you're coming through puberty. So there's
Yeah.
a lot of attachment there.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
all those things were connected.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I remember that I had a stack of drawings of nude women, uh, certainly not pornographic. They were just nude, and that's when I went to India, right, to like be a missionary in India. And India is definitely a much more conservative country, and since we were living and operating in there, there was this general ideology to operate within that, right? Like not to like shock the locals or the natives with our way of being or antics. And then there was again this overriding thought that we could get raided by the police or investigated at any moment, and so these drawings of nudes were considered contraband, or this could compromise our the way that we're seen,
It's
and
kind
it's
of
like
the-
let's get rid of these.
It's kind of the classic, like, if you're worried about it, it's something that you're doing,
Yeah,
right? Like, it's, if you, anyway.
Yeah,
Which is, that can get turned on its head really, really poorly, too. But anyway, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, that's it. So they were all destroyed, burned. I don't really
You had,
remember.
so.
Probably burnt up, I think,
Yeah.
because like Michael was like into burning things, like it was like you burn all your. We had a name for it, Selah trash, right?
Okay.
It was like the word Selah. It's a Bible word. It's basically I don't even know exactly how it's connected to being secretive, but it was associated with things that were secretive, right? Like
Okay.
the outside world should not see these things. Those were labeled Selah, and that shit was meant to be burned. Like you burnt it, right? Like you didn't throw it in the
Okay.
garbage because our enemies are gonna find that shit. And what were they gonna find out? God only knows how that mental process happened. But
Well, no, but that's what I mean, because I mean, we haven't gotten into it, but because you and I have sort of like briefly touched on it, but it was a sex cult too. Like there was that element of it.
yeah,
right?
well, okay, so the founder, David Brandberg, right? He's now dead, and his wife took on the like leadership role. But he had a very repressive childhood, both religiously and I believe sexually. There's a number of podcasts out there. One is there's a podcast named Cults, and there's a 3-part series about my cult and the founder, David Berg, and that unpacks his whole history quite neatly and very insightfully. But yeah, I believe he had a very repressive upbringing and very repressed sexually. So once he became an adult and able to do his own thing and started his own kind of religion / cult, he decided to go the other direction, right? And his whole take was like, anything done in love is fine. Anything done in love. So marriage, outside of marriage, adults with kids, like anything is cool as long as it was only the cult members. So child abuse happened, sexual abuse happened. I would say it did happen at a much higher level, I think, than, let's just say, the average family or group of people, even though abuse happens everywhere all the time, inside and out of cults and religions and communities, and it could be happening down the street. We don't know that.
Yeah.
But obviously when a group of people band together and insulate themselves against, it's the them versus us mentality, which to me is very harmful, very damaging, very pernicious. Speaking of things that are evil, that's the thing that's very because it's like the doctors were the bad guys, the police, the authorities, the governments, they're all like run by the devil. That's a very, it's a very dicey road to go down, because now it's like, now you've built a city, and you've, dug a moat, and you've put the walls up, and now guess what? There's a pedophile inside of that. Eh, you know what? He's probably going to do a lot of abusing. There's somebody who's violent. He's probably going to get away with a lot before the authorities are not going to be notified.
But also, there's even more to that. It's when you're so isolated against the rest of society in that case that, like, I mean, the one thing, and this is a whole other road that. Anyway, there's been the whole idea of pedophilia and all of that has become a very, like, it's become a meme again recently. And one of the things that a lot of people who express their displeasure with these things forget is that that shit comes from somewhere. There isn't, nobody just fucking decides to be a pedophile. If you're going to be a pedophile, it's because somebody taught you how to do that when you were a kid, which means that abuse is already, it progresses. So if you're inside an isolated area where that pedophile is able to get away and keep moving through, the people that they touch, they're not all going to transition that way, but there's more and more and more opportunities for it to continue on. And if you're already isolated, that idea becomes a thing like, oh, it's not a big deal.
Yes, that's right.
Did you, I mean, to whatever level you're comfortable with, because I don't know the answer to the question I'm about to ask, did you experience any of that shit?
Not sexual abuse.
Okay.
There was one occasion which I think was sketchy,
Right.
and probably on that line of like, that probably was inappropriate. I wouldn't go as far as to call it sexual abuse. Physical abuse, yes, all the time. In fact, it was so standard that I didn't even call it abuse until recently. It was getting smacked around, and tree branches, and fly swatters, and
Old school.
spoons, and old school, but like dialed up old school.
Yeah.
Like the again, I hate to say it, but like, I'm just very opposed to religion in general.
Yeah.
In general, when if somebody starts to bring up, well, there's qualities to religion, those are just inherent human qualities. The desire to take care of another person, or be nice to them, doesn't come from the bearded dude in the sky. It doesn't come from monotheism. It comes, I think, out of just pure human nature.
Yeah, I'm in such a, because I'm definitely an atheist, and I grew up in the Catholic Church kind of thing. Went to Catholic school my entire life except the last year when I went to Amherst. And I was kind of always on that side of it, like, religion, just da da da. I'm more recently kind of in a spot where I'm not pro-religion and I'm not anti-religion. What I am is, I don't care what it takes for you to become a decent human being. Use whatever the fuck you want. Second that stops happening, I don't give a shit what it is you're using. It's not good. You know what I mean? So I know there are some people that I grew up and went to school with that are to this day very religious and post about going to church and whatever, and I know them as people, and they're amazing people, and you do what you need to do.
Yes.
You know what I mean? There's other people that I know are religious that use religion as an axe, and those people, they're the ones that I'll say what I have to say to. And even now, I'm at a point where it's like, the idea of spreading my opinion to other people, this is how I spread my opinion. I have conversations with people like you, and if you want to talk about it, then we'll talk about it or whatever. But like, the idea of just spewing out whatever you think to the, I don't know. It's the thing that I do, and it's the thing that I least like about people. So it's a very, very weird balance for me.
Yeah. But here we are discussing in like-minded fashion, and I think that we are so blessed. I hate that word, but I'm going to just use it as, like you said, as a moniker.
Yeah.
But we are very blessed to live in a world, first of all, and specifically in a country where we can say whatever the heck we want. We can discuss ideas that 100 years ago would have gotten us killed, and in even today's world, you probably don't want to talk about those things in certain parts of the world,
Right.
certain governments, and that free discussion and that ability is a beautiful place to be, and also an important step in attaining, like, what are the things I believe. You might have to hear multiple angles in one specific vertical before you have a solid opinion on
I even
on that.
I believe in that idea so much that I've even been exploring that idea with the idea of freedom of speech to begin with lately. And it's not because I do believe in it. That's probably one of the base motivators in my life is because I'd never shut the fuck up anyway. So anybody who's going to try to shut me the fuck up, we're going to have a problem.
Yeah.
So freedom of speech has always been a major motivating factor. And then I look at what's going on and I see the leeway that people take with that freedom, and I I don't think it's. I don't have a problem with freedom of speech. I have a problem with people's lack of freedom of thought. Like, if you don't have the basis to be able to figure out scientific things, you probably shouldn't be having scientific discussions. You can have free thought. You can think and say anything you want. But if you don't know what you're fucking talking about, that doesn't mean what you have to say has any validity.
Yes.
And that's a part that's the Dunning-Kruger thing. That's the I'm guilty of it every day. And that's really the sort of most difficult balance is like I'm guilty of it too. So where do you draw a line in that? It's got to be something that not specifically on freedom of speech, but in a lot of different levels. It has to be something that you've had to really sort of balance out in this kind of journey, right? Because like all the people that you knew, all of the people that were your family, all the people that you're close to, all come from this place and all have this very specific way of thinking. Are there conversations with people that are still in the cult? Probably not, because there's a lot of limitations there, but like, are you able, all the difficult conversations that I'm talking about we can't have on the internet right now, are you able to have those difficult conversations in real life with people that you knew, is what I'm asking.
You know, most of the second generation, that's what I am, meaning born and raised in the cult.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, most have left, and that I believe is largely due just to the way that opinions are so much more easily accessible now. Right. Throw back 100, 200, however many years.
50.
And even 50.
Right.
Exactly. Accessibility to information was much more limited. You know, even let me just paint a picture of a X number of years ago, however many this is. But if I wanted to access a volume of information, I may have had to go to the library and do dial-up internet, or from my house, dial-up internet, and look up things which, there was no Wikipedia, right? It wasn't like a rapidly iterating system of information, and nowadays, of course, the problem is too much and misinformation, right? And false information, and there's people who have no idea how to even parse that, that's a new problem.
Yeah.
But I think all of us were certainly, I and all most of my generation in the cult, and in any cult, because there's dozens and even hundreds out there, even now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I think one way that any cult keeps going is by just limiting the access to information of its members. Right. This is pretty standard. I mean, television, books, radio, internet, like all of these things are limited in any cult that's doing well at all. Either it's limited physically, like you may not read books, or it's limited ideologically, which is like those books out there, those are full of thoughts that are going to destroy your life, right? So I don't know where I was going with that.
It's funny though, because we right from the very beginning we kept referencing about how cultiness sort of is like governments and right, and you look at the way communication happens in social media. I don't know if social media specifically is a cult, but definitely the way in which we communicate with each other represents the way a cult sort of like everybody's talking about the same thing. Well, on Facebook everybody's talking about the same thing. On YouTube it's a little bit different. There's but the thing that you're talking about gets sent to you more and more. It's even in folks that would agree with you about how religion and cults are just the worst thing that we can have. You've already made the point that everything that we have is very, very similar. So, wrapping this very meandering conversation up, maybe with a tight little bow that will never really exist, what do we do? What's the alternative to what you have? What we have?
Well, I think I heard it very well put this morning. Is let's just allow ourselves to have more curiosity about opinions, to be less attached to our belief systems,
Mm-hmm.
any of them, all of them. Uh, Beliefs, I believe, can be looked at with a lot more curiosity instead of dogmatism,
Mm-hmm.
right? I believe certain things to various levels of strength, but I think if all of us can just release our grip on our strongly held beliefs, to me that's a plus. That's a plus across the board.
I think the way I've come to, and we're having, I don't know how much of that is getting picked up, but we're going to wrap up in a second here anyway, but I think the way I've started to come to think about that problem is instead of thinking of everything as good or evil, right or wrong, whatever, everything's a range.
Yes, that's right.
If you think about the spectrum, if you don't, I came to ranges in poker,
Yeah.
but if you don't understand the idea of a range, think about autism in a spectrum, or light waves and how it moves from blue to red, whatever you need, where one thing goes a speedometer from 0 to 100, whatever. Every problem, no matter what you're talking about, is going to have there isn't a yes or a no. There isn't a line. There isn't a dividing line. There are ranges, and those ranges vary from person to person because of the multitudes of our experience and the multitudes of the variety of things that we're dealing with and the people that we are, and having a society where people are allowed to be who they want to be and at the same time not hurt each other.
Yes.
It's kind of where I've been at in my head lately.
Well, like I'm gonna re-wrap up,
Sure.
but like you mentioned something a couple times, and that's a thread I want to just pull on real quick, which is, like, when does freedom of speech go too far?
Yeah.
Or when does your freedom go too far? And to summarize it, there is a title for this way of looking at the world, this belief system, which is culty.
Mm-hmm.
But again, coming back to my original thesis, we get to choose which cult we join.
Yeah.
Which ideological cult.
Yeah.
And this is one that I willingly join and submit myself to, unless and until I hear of a better cult, a better belief system. And,
Right.
and it basically says this, like, you can believe and do and say anything that you want to, with only one condition: that it doesn't encroach on somebody else's ability to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? So I can believe it's okay to punch you in the face. That's fine, I can believe that, but that then encroaches on your ability to have, peace and quiet and safety and not be assaulted, right? So
Yeah.
so it's like, and then freedom of speech too. There's that whole discussion of, like, where do we draw the line? It's when people are going to be harmed because of that, which again, it's a very slippery slope. It's very slippery, but let's just talk about specific one example, which could be: should the information for how to assemble bombs be easily available online?
As a kid who desperately went looking after the anarchist cookbook as a teenager. Okay. Go ahead.
So that's just an example. Now, is it a tool that they they can use to censor and control and manipulate? Of course it is. Of course it is. Oh, you shouldn't have information for how to make bombs out there, guys. And also, we shouldn't talk bad about the pharmaceutical companies because, we don't have any proof. It's a sliding slope, but definitely somewhere within that range
Yeah.
is where I believe we need to at least have the discussion, right?
It starts like I said, it starts to become, it's that range. It's not about should we have pharmaceuticals, should we have censorship of I guess censorship can fall on it too. Should we have freedom of speech? Should we have the ability to smoke weed? Should we have? It's all arranged. The laws and stuff are like lines that we draw, but how we proceed with our lives are all these ranges. You have to make those decisions. Does this work for me? Does this not work for me? How am I going through it? And if the question that you're focused on is how is this, does this interfere on anybody else's life? I think you're generally making a pretty good. It's not always gonna work out well, but back you said you were working on a book. I've been working on one too. Mine's everything you've ever learned. I've learned by playing poker. And chapter 1 is you can do everything right and still lose. And if you're willing to understand that part of it, and try your best to do all the things right, then I think you're doing as good as can be expected anyway.
I love it. But I definitely lean towards more freedom.
100%.
You know, information for how to make a bomb, should it be absolutely nowhere ever? No, I think it should be
people
it should
who
be out there, but it maybe not picking up the phone and pressing 2 buttons and there it is. You know, should it be somewhere? Yeah, maybe I need to like a gun license. I don't know. It shouldn't just be everywhere, easily accessible. It's more sensitive. It's more high risk. But definitely, I don't believe this thing of. Here's a classic example of like. Sorry, I'm gonna keep going until you cut me off.
At some point, I'm gonna just say, all right, go home.
We're done. But technology, and you know, I don't buy this entire worldview of it separating us, and it you know, like
I'm a technophile.
I don't buy any of it. Zero.
Yeah.
Technology to me is the most incredible connecting tool we've ever had, and the further along it goes, the more it connects us.
Yeah, I don't think the problems that we have in society right now are due to technology. I think it's due to our inability to our current lack of understanding of what that technology will mean in our life going forward. Like there's a lot of people trying to have a world of the future that looks a lot like the world of the past, and those two things are incongruent. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of it is like, you know, I don't want things to change.
Yes.
In a time where things are changing more rapidly than ever,
yeah.
To me, there's a part of that mindset that is the problem. Yeah. I go back specifically to, and I don't think I've ever talked about this publicly, nor do I want to, because I'm not looking to call anybody out, but I remembered like at a job that I was at, and I found a computer thing that I could change that sort of altered somebody else's job, made it super easy for them, made a 2-hour, 3-hour workday into a one-click thing that da-da-da-da. And when I showed it to the person, their reaction to me is, what I want is for people to quit fucking with my job. And it's like, I wasn't fucking with your job. Like, this person is coming from a perspective of like, they know this is what they know how to do, and they don't necessarily want to learn new things. They're at where they're comfortable. And the next thing seems like work, and I don't know, I understand it, but I don't think that's a thought process that leads to a lot of success. If that makes any sense. I think that's about the same thing you were talking about. I think we're there.
Yeah, there we go.
Let me see if there is anybody that is, I don't know, because I'm dealing with new technology, folks. We are at an hour here. I don't see any comments popping up here. I don't know that necessarily means we didn't get any. So maybe we'll take a look. If there were comments or questions or ideas or anything that pops up, that if you're sitting through this live or afterwards, throw the comments in. Head on over to the YouTube channel, hit the like and subscribe button. I know you're watching on Facebook. Facebook basically does nothing. It's just it allows you to watch, but it does nothing for us. If you subscribe to the YouTube channel, we're not too far off from actually being able to monetize, which basically means that if I'm real lucky, about once a year, YouTube will send me a check for $20. So go hit that and do the thing. And we'll be back here next week. I believe Nick Nedden is coming back next week to sit down. He was supposed to be here last week, but the weather sort of rained us out. So Asaph, thanks for hanging out. And the handshake thing we're doing, or still